Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Simple English Talking. I'm Jason, your host, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Julia. Hi, Julia. Hey, Jason. Hey, listeners. I'm so excited for today's topic because it's something that can really change how you speak English. Absolutely. Today, we're talking about a powerful idea. Fluent thinking leads to fluent speaking. Now, many learners focus a lot on grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary, but what if I told you that the way you think in English is just as important, if not more important, than just knowing words? Yes, it's true. If your mind is slow or stuck, your speaking will be slow and stuck too. But if you train your brain to think fluently in English, your speaking becomes smooth and confident. That's right. So in this episode, we're going to explore what fluent thinking really means, how it connects to your speaking skills, and most importantly, some practical tips you can start using today to improve both. And we'll share stories and examples too, so you'll see how this works in real life. If you've ever felt stuck when speaking, or like your mind is racing but your words aren't coming out, this episode is for you. Perfect. So grab a cup of tea or coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into the world of fluent thinking and how it can unlock your fluent speaking. Ready, Julia? Ready. Let's go. All right, Julia, let's start with the basics. What exactly do we mean by fluent thinking? It sounds a bit abstract. How would you explain it to our listeners? Good question, Jason. Fluent thinking is basically the ability to think smoothly and quickly in English without having to stop and translate from your native language. It means your brain is working in English, not just using English words. So it's like when you're thinking in your first language, but instead of that, you're doing all your thinking directly in English? Exactly. Think about it like this. When you speak your native language, your thoughts just flow naturally, right? You don't have to pause and look up words or check grammar rules in your head. Fluent thinking means training your mind to have that same flow in English. That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about memorizing words or practicing sentences, but about how fast and naturally your brain can create ideas in English. Yes. It's like the difference between slowly assembling a puzzle piece by piece and seeing the whole picture right away. Fluent thinking lets you understand and create language without much effort. I've noticed sometimes people get stuck because they're trying to translate everything from their own language. That slows down the whole process, right? And that's one of the biggest hurdles. Fluent thinking means breaking free from translation and letting your brain work in English, shaping ideas, feelings, and stories directly. Can you give an example to help our listeners understand better? Sure. Imagine you see a beautiful sunset. If you think fluently in English, your mind instantly thinks, "The sky is so beautiful. The colors are amazing." But if you translate, you might first think the sentence in your own language, then try to find the right English words, which takes more time. That delay is exactly what causes hesitation when speaking. Yes, and fluent thinking is training yourself to avoid that delay. Your brain gets used to English patterns, vocabulary, and expressions so well that it works on its own without that extra step. That sounds like the ultimate goal for any English learner. Definitely. And the good news is, Anyone can develop fluent thinking with practice and the right techniques, which we'll talk about later in the episode. Awesome! So now that we know what fluent thinking is, next we'll explore how it connects directly to fluent speaking. So, Julia, now that we understand what fluent thinking is, how exactly does it connect to fluent speaking? Why is it so important? Great question, Jason. The connection is actually very simple but powerful. Fluent thinking creates fluent speaking. If your thoughts flow smoothly in English, your words will follow naturally. But if your thoughts get stuck or slow, your speaking will too. That makes sense. It's like the brain is the engine and the mouth is the car. If the engine works well, the car moves smoothly. If the engine is slow, the car can't go fast. Exactly. When you think fluently, your brain sends clear, fast signals to your mouth and tongue. This helps you speak with confidence and without long pauses. I remember one of my English learners told me that when she tried to speak, she kept hesitating because she was translating her thoughts word by word. So she sounded slow and nervous. Yes, that's very common. When your mind isn't used to thinking directly in English, you spend a lot of time planning your sentences instead of just speaking. This breaks the flow and makes speaking stressful, and that stress can make you even more stuck. It becomes a cycle, right? But when you train yourself to think fluently, you break that cycle. Speaking becomes more automatic because your brain has already formed the sentences naturally. So fluent thinking is kind of like rehearsing your speech inside your mind before you say it out loud. Yes, and even better, it's spontaneous. It's not rehearsed memorization. It's your brain creating sentences and ideas instantly. That's huge. So for learners, focusing on fluent thinking can help reduce that nervousness and hesitation during conversations. Absolutely. The more you practice thinking in English, the more comfortable you become, and the more your speaking improves without extra effort. Can you share an example of how someone might practice this connection in everyday life? Sure. For example, if you're waiting in line or walking, try to describe what you see or what you're feeling in English inside your head. This builds fluent thinking. Then, when you speak, your brain is already trained to form those thoughts quickly. That's a practical tip. So the key takeaway is, fluent thinking is the foundation. Without it, fluent speaking is almost impossible. Exactly. Fluent thinking is like the invisible engine behind your spoken English. Perfect. Next, let's talk about what stops people from thinking fluently and how to overcome those barriers. All right, Julia, now that we know how important fluent thinking is, let's get real for a moment. What are some of the biggest barriers that stop learners from thinking fluently in English? Good point, Jason. There are quite a few, but I'd say the biggest one is translation. Many learners still think in their native language and then try to convert everything into English. This takes extra time and slows down the whole process. Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Like someone wants to say, "I'm hungry." But first, they think about how to say it in their language, then try to find the words in English exactly. And that extra step causes hesitation and breaks the flow. Another barrier is overthinking. Learners often worry about making mistakes or about grammar rules while they're speaking, right? And that fear can freeze their thoughts. Instead of flowing naturally, their brain is busy judging every word. Yes, and that's really harmful because fluent thinking requires freedom and creativity, not judgment. What about vocabulary? Does limited vocabulary stop fluent thinking too? Absolutely. If you don't have enough words or phrases ready in your brain, it's hard to keep your thoughts moving. You get stuck searching for words, which interrupts fluent thinking. So limited vocabulary, fear of mistakes, overthinking, and translation, these are the main enemies. Yes, and there's one more I want to add: lack of practice. If you don't practice thinking in English regularly, your brain won't build the habit of fluent thinking. Makes sense, like training a muscle. If you don't work it out, it gets weak. Exactly. So recognizing these barriers is the first step to overcoming them. That's great advice for our listeners. Do you have tips on how to notice when these barriers happen during your speaking practice? Sure. For example, if you find yourself pausing a lot, or your mind feels blank, or you catch yourself translating sentences word by word, that's a sign a barrier is blocking your fluent thinking. That's so useful to recognize. Once you know the problem, you can work on fixing it. Yes, and don't worry, these barriers are common and normal. The good news is, with practice and the right techniques, you can overcome them. Awesome! Next, we'll dive into some practical techniques to develop fluent thinking and break through these barriers. All right, Julia, now comes the exciting part. How can our listeners actually develop fluent thinking? What are some practical techniques they can start using today? Great question, Jason. There are several effective techniques, and the key is to make thinking in English a natural habit. One of the best ways is to practice thinking directly in English instead of translating from your native language. That sounds simple but powerful. How can someone start doing that? A good way is to start with small things, like naming objects around you in English or describing what you're doing or feeling throughout the day. For example, when you're cooking, think, "I am cutting the vegetables," or when you're walking, "The weather is nice today." I like that. It's like giving your brain small exercises to get used to English. Exactly. Another great technique is visualization. Imagine a situation and think about it in English, like imagining you're ordering food in a restaurant or talking to a friend. So kind of mentally rehearsing conversations? Yes, but without memorizing scripts. It's about freely creating sentences and ideas in your mind, just like real life. What about using an inner dialogue, like talking to yourself inside your head? Yes, that's another powerful method. You can mentally narrate your day, express your thoughts, or even argue with yourself in English. This builds your brain's fluency. That sounds fun, like practicing with your inner friend. Exactly. And for more advanced learners, I recommend journaling in English. Writing your thoughts helps structure your ideas, which then makes thinking and speaking easier. And what about tools like watching English movies or listening to podcasts? Do they help? Definitely. Listening helps your brain get used to English patterns and rhythms. The more you listen, the more natural it feels to think in English. I've also heard about using flashcards or vocabulary apps. How do those fit in? They're helpful too, but the key is to use the words actively. Don't just memorize, try to think with the new words, make sentences, and connect ideas. So, practice, practice, and practice. What about time? How long does it take to develop fluent thinking? It depends on the person, but consistency is most important. Even 10 to 15 minutes a day of focused thinking practice can make a big difference over weeks and months. That's encouraging. So our listeners don't need to spend hours every day, just regular practice. Exactly. And don't be afraid to make mistakes during your mental practice. Fluent thinking is about progress, not perfection. Awesome tips, Julia. I'm sure our listeners will find these techniques very useful. Up next, we'll talk about how mindset and confidence play a role in fluent thinking. Julia, we've talked a lot about techniques and practice, but I think mindset and confidence play a huge role in fluent thinking, too. What do you think? Absolutely, Jason. Mindset is like the foundation. If you believe you can think and speak fluently, your brain is more willing to take risks and try new ways of thinking in English. So, a positive mindset helps your brain open up to learning instead of shutting down because of fear. Exactly. Many learners get stuck because they're afraid of making mistakes or sounding silly. That fear creates mental blocks and stops fluent thinking. I get that. When I first started learning, I was so nervous about speaking that my mind went blank. That's totally normal, but the key is to be kind to yourself and remember that making mistakes is part of the learning process. And confidence grows with practice, right? Yes. The more you practice thinking and speaking, the more confident you become. And that confidence feeds back into your mindset, making fluent thinking easier. It's like a positive cycle. Confidence boosts fluent thinking, and fluent thinking boosts confidence. Exactly. So if you're feeling stuck, remind yourself to stay positive and keep practicing. Your brain needs time and patience to build these new habits. Great advice, Julia. Mindset and confidence really are the invisible superpowers behind fluent thinking and speaking. Yes, and with the right mindset, every step you take brings you closer to fluency. All right, Julia, we've talked about the theory and mindset behind fluent thinking. But what about actual practice activities? What can our listeners do daily to build fluent thinking? Great question, Jason. There are some simple but powerful activities anyone can do to get their brain used to thinking in English. One of my favorites is daily self-talk. Just talking to yourself in English throughout the day, like narrating your actions or thoughts inside your head. Exactly. For example, if you're making breakfast, say to yourself, I am cracking the eggs now. I am stirring the batter. It helps you practice forming sentences naturally. I love that because it's easy to do anytime and anywhere. Yes. Another activity is describing your surroundings out loud or mentally. Look around and describe what you see, hear, or feel in English. That's a great way to build vocabulary and make fluent thinking more automatic. Definitely. Also try thinking in questions and answers. For example, ask yourself, "What will I do today?" And then answer in English. This keeps your brain active and thinking in English. I like that. It's like having a mini conversation with yourself. Exactly. And for something more interactive, you can use English language apps or chatbots to practice quick thinking. Right. Like apps that simulate conversations so you can practice responding fast. Yes. And don't forget reading aloud. When you read in English, try to really think about the meaning and then speak it out loud smoothly. That helps connect your thinking with speaking muscles. Exactly. Lastly, journaling in English for even 5 to 10 minutes a day can help organize your thoughts and develop fluent thinking. Great. So to sum up, daily self-talk, describing surroundings, questions and answers, thinking using apps, reading aloud, and journaling. Yes, those are all fantastic ways to build fluent thinking and improve your English naturally. Awesome. Now our listeners have clear, practical ways to start thinking fluently every day. All right, Julia, it's time for some Q&A from our listeners. We asked them to send in their questions about fluent thinking and speaking. Ready to hear some? Absolutely, Jason. I love hearing from our listeners. What's the first question? Here's one from Maria in Spain. How can I stop translating in my head and start thinking directly in English? Great question, Maria. The best way is to practice small moments of thinking in English, like naming objects around you or describing what you're doing in simple English. The more you practice, the less you rely on translation. Nice. Here's another from Ahmed in Egypt. I get nervous and my mind goes blank. How can I keep thinking fluently when I'm anxious? That's a common problem, Ahmed. Try to slow down your breathing and focus on simple thoughts. Remind yourself that it's okay to make mistakes. Practicing daily will build your confidence and reduce anxiety over time. Great advice. And here's a listener story from Lena in Brazil. She said she used to struggle with speaking because she translated everything, but after practicing self-talk and thinking in English daily, she feels much more confident now. That's inspiring. It shows how consistent practice really changes your fluent thinking and speaking. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Lena. To all our listeners, keep practicing and remember, fluent thinking is a journey. Yes, and we're here with you every step of the way. All right, Julia, we've covered a lot today about how fluent thinking leads to fluent speaking. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways for our listeners. Sounds good, Jason. First, fluent thinking means your brain works smoothly and quickly in English without relying on translation. Right. And the connection between thinking and speaking is strong. Fluent thinking makes speaking easier and more natural. We also talked about common barriers like translating, overthinking, fear of mistakes, and limited vocabulary, and how to overcome those with practical techniques like thinking directly in English, visualization, self-talk, and journaling. Plus, the importance of mindset and confidence. Believing in yourself helps you take risks and keep practicing. And finally, daily practice activities like narrating your day, describing surroundings, and reading aloud make a huge difference. Exactly. So if you keep these points in mind and practice regularly, your fluent thinking and speaking will improve step by step. Great advice, Julia. Thanks to everyone for listening. Keep practicing your English and stay confident. Yes. And remember, fluent thinking leads to fluent speaking. See you next time. Well, Julia, that brings us to the end of today's episode on Fluent Thinking Leads to Fluent Speaking. I hope our listeners found it helpful and inspiring. Me too, Jason. Remember, fluency is a journey, and every step you take in practicing your thinking will bring you closer to speaking confidently. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to leave your questions or comments below. We love hearing from you. Absolutely. And follow us on social media for daily tips and motivation. Thanks for joining us on the English Learning Podcast. Until next time, keep thinking in English. Take care, everyone.